and welcome everyone. My name is Michel van Bergen and Berec Chair 2021, the body of European regulators for electronic communications, that group of telco regulators in Europe. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you to today's workshop on 5G. Today we will focus on two themes, which are new business models and value chain and innovation. We organize this workshop as 5G is one of our main area of interest in Berec strategy. Our first and foremost objective is to promote full connectivity and by doing so incentivize investments and EU leadership in 5G and fiber across the communication sector. Foreseeably, this requires to ensure that very high capacity networks and 5G services are available in a timely manner and in line with European values and interests, such as security, protection of end users, environmental challenges, and so on. Over the past years, Berec has identified many aspects of regulation that are involved in the 5G ecosystem. This work has resulted in several reports ranging from infrastructure sharing to the role of regulation in enabling 5G ecosystem. And last year, Berec published a report that contains an overview of regulatory issues that we anticipate related to 5G services called the 5G Radar. The Berec 5G Radar and accompanying guides seek to help national regulatory authorities to anticipate the issues involved, support the pace of innovation to be optimized, and ensure that proper steps are taken on time by taking into account developments in the markets. This workshop is being organized in the backdrop of our previous work. As 5G services are introduced gradually, we continue our exploratory work monitoring the developments in the markets. This entails also a dialogue with stakeholders and to take a closer look at several aspects related to 5G. We want to hear from you and draw lessons. Today's workshop is divided in two sessions. The first session will provide introductory remarks on first panel discussion, which will bring together experts in a possible supply chain diversification that 5G may enable, such as neutral host operators and private 5G networks. The second session will feature a second panel that will discuss issues related to the anticipated pace of innovation in 5G services. This session will bring together experts in the field of 5G verticals and emerging trends such as digital twins and blockchain. I am very happy that we are being joined today by distinguished speakers to enlighten us with their views, and I wish to thank you already in advance for your participation today. First, I give the floor to Jean-Marie, who is our co-chair in the Planning and Future Trend Group, the working group in Berec in charge with mapping regulatory evolution. With that, Jean, the floor is yours. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michel. Welcome everyone for this workshop. We would like to first and foremost thank the speakers for accepting our invitation and for sharing their expertise within these two fields. For the first round, Bert will be moderating the session, and then I'll take over during the second round to moderate the session, which will focus more on innovation. Bert?
Thank you for the introduction. I won't repeat anything that has been said. We have an excellent panel. I will just briefly mention the names. And since we meet online, I have not been able to see if everybody's there, so I hope they're all there. Ben Wreschner from Vodafone, Jacques Bonifay from Transhotel, Jaume Pujol from Cellnex, Rene from Ericsson, Thomas Budník from Thein, Dr. Marja Matinmikko-Blue from the University of Oulu. Let's start right away after I have some practical instructions for the speakers, because besides excellent lineup of speakers, we also have a very interesting list of participants. They may be coming online as we proceed. 240 approximately participants, of 140 being from NRAs and governments. So if you have a message for regulators and governments, what a wish list maybe, this is your chance to address them. And we have all different backgrounds, economists and legal people. We have technicians. So I hope your answers will be matching our level of understanding, because I know that you are the experts and know all the details, and we are regulators. Okay, one more thing. The outcome of this workshop is a workshop report, of course, and we hope to make it a little more than the regular workshop reports that you're used from us. We hope to analyze the matter at hand, all the insights that we learned today, and this may lead to tasks of BEREC in the near future. The first speaker on the list is Ben Wreschner from Vodafone. Is he there?
Yes, I am here. Just unmuting myself as is protocol.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So we have prepared a list of questions, and we have shared it with the speakers. We only have 12 minutes per speaker, and we have a long list of questions. So my request is to speak very fast or stick to highlights. And if we don't have time, we will skip the last question. So maybe your main message first. May I address you with your first name, Ben? We know each other.
Yeah.
So the first question is that 5G brings about disruptive change, and how do mobile network operators like Vodafone adapt or tapping into the new opportunities being presented by 5G? And maybe I can immediately continue with the next question. And what is your perception of the interest of the verticals that they show to you in the use of 5G?
Thank you, Bert. Let me firstly thank you, BEREC, everyone, for hosting this event. Can you hear me clearly, just to check? So thank you, and it's nice to see some familiar names, familiar faces for those who have video on, and it's nice to connect with you all again. In terms of the first question, so 5G bringing disruptive change, and how are we tapping into the new opportunities? So let me start with sort of a note of caution. So we've invested hugely just for the right to play. So we've, as Vodafone, we've already invested about 5 billion euros just buying spectrum across the EU. And Michelle, your opening intervention, which talks about the need and the desire to have connectivity everywhere, be it fiber, be it 5G. And one has to put that into the context of us as a company, but then our peers across the industry having spent a huge amount of money just for the right to play in the 5G space. And it is worth bearing that in mind. But we are, as I'm sure you imagine now, working furiously to try to make the most out of that big investment. It's not just the spectrum, of course, rolling out the networks across European cities as we speak. And I'll just call out a couple of examples. So we're looking at managed private networks. We see a big opportunity there. And already we're working with Ford to basically help them revolutionize their manufacturing process through a 5G private network. Just one example of how we're doing it. It's a different type of use case from our traditional connectivity solutions. Another example, we're also investing heavily in mobile edge computing. We have a partnership with AWS. If people want to ask lots of technical questions, I'm afraid I'm only going to disappoint you today. I cannot give you the technical details. I'm here in my role as chief economist of Vodafone, not as chief technology officer or network deployer. So I understand the terminology to an extent, but I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. But mobile edge or multi-access edge computing, it has different names. But basically allows us to have a distributed cloud solution closer to the companies that we're servicing, their own points of deployment or manufacturing. And this is obviously very helpful when there's a need for ultra low latency services. If those two things in combination, what we're finding is, unlike 4G, the real opportunities and solutions for 5G are not things that we're going to do by ourselves. There's a lot of partnership involved in this. We talk about the overall connectivity ecosystem, or indeed the digital ecosystem, and it's clear as we go forward, we are working increasingly with partners, but we are finding very attractive use cases and solutions that especially on the industrial side, that are now in the process of being demanded. I also think from talking to of regulators and regulatory authorities, I mean it is worthwhile bearing in mind this change, in that the connectivity sector is not a standalone sector anymore. It is one within an ecosystem which has many players and many different competitive conditions. And in that regard, it is, we think, and obviously we would say this, that within that ecosystem, the connectivity part, or the traditional connectivity part, has been a sector which has been heavily regulated with extremely intrusive regulation. And I think the time now, when you as regulators think about what is needed to really ensure that we have both the connectivity everywhere, but also the investment in European companies to drive the European way of digital solutions going forward, it is really important to look at the overall ecosystem approach and identify where the real bottlenecks and the real risk of competitive constraints come in, rather than, as I'm afraid, the case where you have existing competence and therefore existing focus in regulating one part of that ecosystem, which potentially could damage the overall competitiveness within the different parts of that ecosystem. And that's really, I mean, it was referred to earlier, the BEREC 5G radar consultation. We through the GSMA, the Industry Association, responded to that. And that was one of the key points that we wanted to stress. This is now much more than just connectivity, and therefore it is really important that BEREC and the regulatory authorities don't bias one type of solution over another. It needs to be looked at about the different constraints between different solutions. And I mean, it was referred to about the difference between mobile solutions versus maybe also not mobile, but 5G versus Wi-Fi. All of these are possibilities, and it's really important as regulators that we're moving into new solutions, untapped potential, not to predetermine who the winners and losers should be, but should ensure that competition between those different types of solutions is allowed to flourish. Because at the end of it, we see real boost to not the European connectivity sector. In the larger picture, that's not so relevant. It's the industrial base of Europe that can hugely benefit from having the best-in-class connectivity and digital solutions, and we need to make sure that the of technology.
Sorry, Ben, we lost you. We lost you for 30 seconds, I think.
I think in terms of question one, I just say I think I'll stop there. I think that's a sufficient opening introduction.
Thank you. What do you think the competitive landscape? You said look at the new bottlenecks, give all the technologies the same chance. Regulation. See, we regulators are famous for regulation, but we can also make less regulation, right? Did you come across in your field trials, did you come across things regulators should do to make 5G a success?
But I struggle to hear you. I don't know if it was just me, but it was a little bit like you were underwater from my perspective. But I think you were asking, did I find are there things that regulators can do to make the 5G a success? Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I mean, if I let's say maybe take the bigger picture, I think, and I'm not going to say open up the net neutrality debate. I just use it as an example. I've got a lot, many years of working in this space, and but I think with you on, I recall meetings on the fixed termination rate cost modelling exercise that was done with the Commission in conjunction with berec. And if I think about the regulatory approaches which have been followed over time, we started off. I go back to 2001, 2002, started building mobile cost models, which were predominantly driven by voice, and then we moved over to a 3G world where we had voice and data, but still voice was probably more dominant. Then we moved into 4G, where suddenly we have data being the dominant service, and it complicated how regulators looked at the cost base of the industry and how it tried to regulate the industry. As we move into 5G, I think the big step change that we will have is that whereas previously it was assumed that voice was roughly all voice was the same and data was roughly all data was the same, we move into a world where in 5G there isn't one category of data. There are very different categories of data meeting very different needs with very different economic profiles in terms of not only the supply, but especially the demand for these different types of data services. And it's going to be critical that there isn't an oversimplification of the analysis of 5G and that, oh, well, a gigabyte is a gigabyte, whatever happens. It isn't. There's very different service wraparound, different types of connectivity services. And in order to ensure that where you have existing competence, shall I say, that we don't go down sort of rabbit holes and regulate in an inappropriate way, it's very important to understand the impact that this will have going forward on how the industry will need to sell solutions, not just connectivity, and therefore not to regulate in the traditional manner, which I think will lead to some quite undesirable economic outcomes. And then the other thing I'll say from a policy perspective is, yes, there should always be focus on where there is competition, to let competition do its magic, shall I say, and where there isn't competition, to seek appropriate levels of intervention. And for me, that needs to be considered much broader across the digital ecosystem, across the whole supply chain. We talk about supply chain diversification, maybe we'll come to that in a little while, but ensuring that we focus our attention on where there's a risk of under competition and not ever increasing regulation on parts of the market, which I think are actually quite competitive.
Thank you. And this is maybe why we should invite native speakers only who can speak so much faster than others, like me, for example. So the last question we had is about the supply chain before you, your suppliers. This market has traditionally been dominated by a handful of suppliers, and what are the challenges and opportunities presented by these nascent, open, and multi-vendor approaches?
So look, it's well known that for us, we have invested heavily. Oh, sorry. Sorry, yes, we have invested heavily in Open RAN. Again, we'll only disappoint if people want very technical descriptions of what Open RAN is, but it does effectively separates the hardware and software layer in the mobile network to allow greater competition in certain parts of the network. Now, we believe this is a very exciting development for the industry as a whole. We initially launched an agreement with Telefonica, with Orange, and with Deutsche Telecom, and now Telecom Italia has joined as well. And we do believe this is a way of increasing competition in that part of the supply chain. We are looking for more R&D. We think that is something that government should also get involved in investing in this, because it is a way of increasing European sovereignty on its networks. Yes, there are some big European vendors, but of course it's not a secret about the issues around Chinese vendors in the supply chain and what the developments are in that space. So we see Open RAN as a very important development to ensure the European sovereignty of its networks, where in our case, we as a company will have greater control over some of the key control points within the network to ensure that we bring some of that capability back into the European space where we operate our networks. So it is a big area of investment for us. And again, echoing my comments I made earlier, not something we would ever dream of doing by ourselves. So it's a huge amount of investment in not money as much as time and effort with our fellow industry participants, but also with software suppliers from different parts of the world, including, say, Capgemini. We've recently had a bit of a partnership launched with them. So we are seeing now, which was something that was important to us, an increasing emergence of European software providers coming to the Open RAN space, which I think can only be good for competition, which is, as I said, what we all strive for, but also the diversity, but also the assurance of the supply of European networks.
Thank you. We'll keep the last question if we have time later on. Let's first move to the next speaker. And we have tried to invite speakers from all angles to cover this topic from all the areas. And the next speaker is Mr. Boniface from Transitel and MVNO.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, I'm managing an MVNO. Maybe more important, I am an entrepreneur managing a company and fighting every day against giants, and not only in Europe, but also worldwide. So it's no secret that 5G is going to focus on the industrial market, on the IoT market. And IoT connectivity is going to use public network and also private network. So, and the usage will be combined. Some applications will be only on public network, some applications on private network, and some applications will use both networks. So, and also as a company, as a European company, working in the IoT, my domestic market is Europe. I am French, you can hear that, but my domestic market is not France. Actually, my biggest market is UK. So we compete worldwide, and the domestic market is Europe. That means that in Europe, as a European player, we need to be strong, we need to be comfortable. And to be able to work properly in Europe, we need to have equivalent conditions on so network access across Europe. So we need to have similar and good 5G network access across all Europe. And I can tell you today that the conditions of network access are very different from a country to another country. So we don't have at all a single market in terms of access to network. I think it is a problem for MVNO, but I do also think that it might be a problem for maybe smaller MNO. The second aspect is the access to the private network frequency. You only have a few countries in Europe which have been organized to give private network frequencies. They each have their point of contact where you need to apply. The financial conditions, the regulatory conditions are all different in each country. And what I think we really need at European level is a one-stop shopping, which could be organized by Berec, where you have one framework to apply for a frequency across Europe under the same network. And of course, the conditions may vary from one country to the other country, but I think it will facilitate our work to have a single point of contact to get frequency for private network anywhere in Europe. That was kind of an introduction to what I think is necessary, because we are very far from that. In the US, online, you can have a frequency for a private network anywhere in the US. It's much more simple in the US. Going to the question you ask, question on eSIM and 5G. I'm just going to give one example where I think things going to be changed. I've been pushing for cellular connectivity for laptop and tablet for the last 10 years, and I'm still very surprised that we have less than 5% of the laptop and tablet which have 4G enabled capability. Most of the people look for Wi-Fi even when they are outside of their home or outside of the office. Sometimes they use their phone to have a private Wi-Fi, which is not so convenient. We see the development of eSIM for laptop and tablet, but it's still slow. I tend to think that with 5G, we're going to have an acceleration of that. And I hope that in a couple of years, all laptop and tablet will have a 5G capability with an eSIM. 20 years ago, we didn't have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi automatic, so whether it was 21 or 25 years ago, I don't remember. But since the last 15 years, whenever you buy a device, whatever is the device, you know you have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. You don't even ask. It's obvious. I do believe that in a couple of years, it will be obvious that you will have a 5G capability in the laptop or tablet with an eSIM, of course, to facilitate the onboarding of the customers. Another question was about connected car. Of course, the 5G for connected car, everybody thinks about the multiple applications we're going to have on a car. That will be a way for the car manufacturer to differentiate and compete against themselves. And they will be in partnership with many developers, many service provider, insurance company, but not only. And the ultimate app will be the autonomous driving capability. But car manufacturers do have factories. They do have car dealers. And those factories, those car dealers are going to evolve, and they will have, and they are actually building private network. And the way you're going to build a car, to assemble a car, the way you will test the car at the end of the assembly line, you're going to use a 5G network. The way you're going to manage the maintenance of a car, you do predictive maintenance when the car is driving, using 5G when it's in the middle of the road. But when the car is arriving to the car dealer for maintenance, you will use the private network for to optimize the maintenance of a car. So whether you are in a private network environment or public network environment, that will be a combined environment, and the car, the automotive industry is going to use massively 5G as private network and public network, and basically it's very linked to my first comment that basically I think it's very important to facilitate access across all Europe at similar conditions for MNO and MVNOs. MVNOs tend to be more innovative because if they don't innovate, they die. So basically we don't have a choice. And private network access, because it's both together that we need, private network and public network. I tend to be quick, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Could you say something specific about eSIMs?
By eSIM, that's what I said about eSIM, is that I think you see slowly laptop and tablet manufacturer putting eSIM capability in their laptop and tablet. And I do think that this will be soon in almost all laptop and tablet, which means that any laptop and tablet that you will buy will have cellular connectivity in 5G. And that will be a different way for you to use your computer. Today, when you use your computer, you look for Wi-Fi. So when you're at the office, at home, it's fine. When you are in a restaurant, when you are outside, it's more complex. So you look for public Wi-Fi, which is not always secure, or sometimes you use your phone. Myself, I've got 4G connected in my laptop. I just open my laptop and I'm connected. Today, it's a physical SIM card, but we see more and more devices which are 5G. And today, less than 5% of laptop and tablet have a 4G enabled modem. And I do believe that in a couple of years, I hope 50, 60, 80, maybe 100% of the device will have 5G capability with an eSIM, just as they have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi.
I got it. Yeah. Great. Super. Shall we move on to the next speaker then? We'll come back to you later on.
Yes.
Rene Sommer from Ericsson. I have seen you, so welcome as well.
Thank you.
So you have been, as Ericsson, a leading European equipment vendor, being involved in many trials and pilots. And what is your observations on how the ecosystem will look like? Can we draw a new supply chain, according to you?
Yes, thank you guys for the question. So I think when we talk about the 5G ecosystem, I think we need to look at this topic from both the demand side and the supply side. And it's very important to recognize that demand side is, of course, setting important precondition for the supplier side. So this is an absolute necessity that, of course, looking at the diversity on the supply side, disconnected from the demand side, it's a fallacy. But to give you some numbers, I think there is a lot of misunderstanding about the size of the 5G ecosystem. And looking at the TechNexus summary from Q4 2020, they identified 400 unique players across the 5G ecosystem, of course, which is a broad system of different stakeholders across different layers. I mean, from standardization, we have the components, then we have different technology domain, and of course, we have service providers. I think the latest count from Q2 this year is up to 600 unique players. If we then move and look at the demand side part of the equation here, I'm thinking of the GSMA Intelligence Global Mobile Trends Report from 2020. I think there were some very interesting observations that from the demand side, there is an increasing growth of diversity, which is driven more or less by three trends, both in terms of new type of network business models that are emerging. You have also, of course, innovation on top taking place that also trickles down to the supplier level, which allows, of course, for new companies and small companies to enter. And we also see, of course, the verticals and the enterprise themselves also taking an active role here. So what we see is a traditional full stack mobile operator end-to-end model that is now both moving into a hybrid model where we see increased role of tower companies in the passive side. Sometimes they are also cross-owned by the MNOs, depending on the region, but we see some increased horizontalization on the passive side. Then, of course, on the private network side, we see increased activity on the active equipment side, both from the enterprises themselves, as I mentioned already, but of course, mobile operators are there, and we see also cloud and hyperscalers becoming much more active in this space as well. And this is, of course, taking place both on licensed, dedicated, and unlicensed spectrum. And then we have this neutral host model where we see either mobile network operators in some countries, we see hotspot operators or enterprises or actually government stepping in here as well, and see also developments on that side. So all in all, we see that there are developments on the demand side, of course, which also then create important conditions for the supply side to respond and to broaden its current fabric. And maybe this is here where I think there's a lot of disinformation on the two supplies, and then we would very much welcome Berec to bring in some facts in the debate. One private company, which is called Omdia, has a telecoms vendor contract database that tracks publicly announced vendor carrier contracts. And looking at the information from this source from January this year, and looking specifically on the supply side of the 5G ecosystem, they identified publicly announced contracts from 14 different RAN suppliers, 14 different transport suppliers, 13 different core network suppliers, and 14 different OSS, BSS suppliers, and 9 different suppliers of mobile edge. So I think the importance here is to understand when we talk about the diversity on the supply side, that while market shares are typically used as an indicator for lack of diversity, market shares are consequences of operators' commercial decisions. And market shares do not reflect actual breadth, which I was referring to here, which is the availability of different suppliers in the vendor selection process. So, of course, it is important to understand whether diversity means that the regulators are going to regulate number of suppliers in an operator network, and in that sense introduce caps, or if it's about providing direct government subsidies to specific companies, which of course is a very different discussion. Point being here, of course, that market shares reflect operator selection process, not the number and breadth of suppliers available market, and I think this is a very welcome clarity that we think Berec should, of course, take note of. And just to finish off there, looking at the Omdia's database from January 2021 and looking at some 5 different regions, US had in January 2021 36 active vendors across these 5 domains: RAN, transport, core, OSS, and mobile edge. And in RAN alone, there were 9 suppliers active in the US market. South Korea had 26, Australia had 16, Canada 14, and Japan 29. So, and this is from the publicly announced contracts alone. I think I stop there for your first question.
Thank you. Then I was wondering if you see new dominant players, if you have identified upcoming players that will have a certain dominance, for example, in the digital platforms area.
Yes. So I understand that there were 2 questions there. One was how we as a company approach the multi-vendor and what recommendation we have to policymakers, and then if we see any dominant players. So if I start with the Ericsson angle here first, that of course when we look at the questions concerning sustainable, and I would really like to underscore the sustainable diversity of the supply chain, we believe that the fundamental prerequisite for creating sustainable diversity, which is not about rolling out a particular product in a current generation, but also developing the next G. So we had some spending about licenses earlier. I mean, vendors are already now spending research R&D money for 6G development, which of course is 10 years away. And to be sustainable, of course, in this market, you need to have the scale and to have the resources to develop products, not only for current generation and current releases and current market demands, but also for the next G. And scale is, of course, absolutely essential, and global standards play an important role. And in that context, of course, Ericsson is not only is the largest contributor of 3GPP 5G new radio contribution to 3GPP, but also we were the largest contributor to O-RAN Alliance specifications, and we were the 2nd largest contributor to O-RAN Alliance open source and commitments, and also 2nd largest contributor open source in core networks. So of course we are very keen to create this platform for innovation, which then of course is available for the industry, not only Ericsson, but all the other participants to use these technical standards to build their products and actually compete with Ericsson. And of course, many other companies, including Europeans, are very much involved in this. One aspect when it comes to the discussion around the standards, of course, I think it is important to keep in mind that the discussion is extremely binary today. So it is worthwhile to recall that the 3GPP today has more than 700 companies present working in that collaboration, and there are today more than 100 open interfaces in 3GPP. So the current discussion we have about Open RAN, of course, is not a binary discussion that might sometimes appear, but we are moving towards increased openness, which has been an industry trend and welcome trend for generations and decades. From our company point of view, as has been with the previous 100 open interfaces, it is not just about openness, it is also about performance, which is of course a market demand from our customers. They want performance as a way of course evaluating different vendors, and that's why you of course get selected as a supplier, and you qualify through that long list of alternatives. Then, of course, efficiency is extremely relevant discussion as well. And here we see increased role of energy efficiency in the context of the Green Deal and other discussions. And of course, security, which is also very important. And in this context, of course, we look at innovation, both from RAN automation or cloudification and openness, that we are saying you need all these 4 things: openness, you need high performance, security, and energy. And these are the 4 things that we think are important going forward. If I may round off then with what kind of recommendations we have for the policymakers, the starting point number 1 is, of course, an open standard is much more than an open interface. And of course, standardization and the necessity to think also about the international trade, which is important to reach scale. We, of course, think that standardization needs to be open and compliant with WTO TBT rules or with the EU 1025 Standards Directive, which among others means that there is an open process, a democratic process, a consensus driving where every member has actually a voting rights, which is not necessarily the case for all these bodies out there. So I think that's one thing. The second point being is that, of course, diversity is a question for a supply chain. And here, of course, the main point is about not moving bottlenecks. And I completely agree with Ben's point about being technology neutral between 5G and Wi-Fi. And we think that's a principle that needs to cut across all the layers of the 5G ecosystem. So not only about spectrum licensing, it of course has to be a technology neutral rules when it comes to device operating systems, when it comes to the networks and the architecture, cloud infrastructure, and also semiconductors, and also the cables that interconnect the different parts of the countries. So our advice to policymakers, of course, is to make sure that 5G is a part of an ICT system, and we think that it is absolutely necessary to have a relevant definition of the ecosystem, to identify clearly stated objective criteria. What's the purpose of achieving the end with increased diversity? Our suggestion would be, of course, maybe resilience is important. And this is, for example, why we maintain that resilience and being holistic in this approach requires to ensure that there are interventions that are not only moving problems throughout the supply chain, but actually addressing some specific objectives where resilience, in our view, should be considered as an important point. So in all, to finish off here, of course, we are very much for an ICT supply chain that continuously welcomes and expands openness. We think that openness is something which comes with performance, security, and energy efficiency. We strongly think that, as we have done in Europe before, we continue with a technology neutral regulation across the whole supply chain. We do not believe, as Ben said, into governments picking winners. We see that as a natural extension of that principle throughout the whole supply chain and not only parts of the supply chain. And we believe in that sense that policymakers have to maintain neutrality and then let, of course, the market forces here to compete, to develop, and to provide operators with the best possible choices, where they are free to choose the technology they think suits their needs best.
That's a very clear story. Thank you. So we'll come back to you later. First, our next speaker, Mr. Jaume Pujol from Cellnex Telecom. I have not seen him yet. Is he there?
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi. Yeah, welcome.
Okay, great.
So Cellnex Telecom is a leading European infrastructure operator embracing the neutral host model, and Cellnex has participated in a number of 5G pilots, such as 5G City, 5G On, exploring neutral host business models. Can you expand on that, on those business opportunity that 5G and neutral host concepts can provide?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Bert, and all the Berec team for inviting us here to share our views and our idea of what this neutral host model can bring to the European connectivity. So let me start agreeing on something. I think that we all can agree that for improving connectivity, Europe needs network densification. That means more towers, more infrastructures, and so on, and a faster rollout and reduction of the time to market, enabling all 5G related technologies to be in place. And third, for sure, we need funding. Okay, so what does Cellnex brings to this ecosystem? Well, regarding the network densification, we bring the shared wireless infrastructure. Regarding the faster rollout, we bring quick and open access. And regarding the funding, we provide a long-term investment with an industrial commitment. We are here to stay. We are investing to produce services. So regarding this shared wireless infrastructure, well, as said, we can agree that Europe needs more connectivity, needs for 5G, but also 4G and other technologies to be made available everywhere. And here, what we propose is to build and manage towers, helping to overcome this digital divide and to provide better coverage, not only in urban but also in rural areas. The idea to do in doing so is to share and mutualize infrastructures among different customers. And in doing so, we are ensuring a better and more efficient use of the resources like solar or energy or whatever, and we are giving a more sustainable activity. Second point was mentioning quick and open access. Well, I think that my colleagues also raised this point that 5G will not only be driven by the 4G and other generations, but also here we'll have IoT, smart cities, and other kind of business. Whatever the emerging sectors, the neutral host infrastructure sharing model is applicable. Indeed, the independent infrastructures already supports today dozens of wireless networks apart from the 3 or 4 national MNOs. So we think that here we bring value on opening those networks. Independent neutral host infrastructures facilitates competition and allows all players to access the infrastructures easily and quickly. This encourages smaller wireless operators and innovative new applications, reducing the time to market. Moreover, the challenge in the 5G era is not just about towers, it's also delivering fiber, connected to small cells, dedicated infrastructure, buildings, factories, and so on and so forth. So I think that we have here a big field still to be run, isn't it? And third, long-term investment. Well, try to imagine a 5G network capable to cope with all opportunities that we are just envisaging. Is not easy. Probably we should wait for next generations, for new generations to imagine and create the services for the future. However, I think that we can agree that to deploy this connectivity, either is 5G, 6G, or whatever, we need funding. And for this, Europe is preparing its recovery plan, also alongside with the review of the 5G action plan, new industrial strategy, and the digital compact, and so on. So we don't really think that identifying independent infrastructure operators or neutral host providers as a key of these new industrial strategies and new plans for providing a better connectivity to Europe would help the European Union to reach their goals in terms of connectivity. Okay, and that's for the first question thing.
And any policy recommendations? I mean, what are your key challenges that we could help you with?
Well, plenty of, for sure, as you can imagine. We are in a competitive market, and it's hard, but even it's interesting, isn't it? So more than recommendations, well, sharing some thoughts. We are quite sure that any further regulatory initiative will recognize the pro-competitive nature of the independent towercos and the neutral host model, as the European Electronic Communications Code already does. We do think that appropriate policy incentives could lead to a significant additional investments in Europe, as I said at the beginning, and that the European Union would benefit from greater levels of connectivity that will make it a world-class digital society. One word about the spectrum. Well, two concepts here. One is we do really think that all licensed spectrum needs to be in the market, needs to be put available for MNOs under reasonable conditions as soon as possible, because without the spectrum, no one can provide these 5G services. That's clear. And then second thought about spectrum. Well, spectrum for private networks. Europe needs an harmonized band to get benefit of the private networks, of the possibilities that opens these new solutions. I don't know if the right band is or not the 3.8 for the 2 proposed by the RSPG. Maybe it is. In any case, one suggestion that we would make is let's take a decision as Europe and let's put this band into the market as soon as possible, because we are lagging behind other geographies, and we are losing opportunities for sure. And just one final remark regarding the broadband cost reduction directive, which is currently under review. Well, we see it clearly as a piece of regulation for succeeding on deploying the full connectivity across Europe. For this, we are convinced that the neutral host model, as it is pro-competitive, won't be impacted by the review of this broadband cost reduction directive. Indeed, we do really think that either the broadband cost reduction directive or the regulation in general should focus in facilitating the development of very high capacity networks, and should avoid introducing any barriers, and also preventing any speculative behaviors. That's, for instance, regarding unreasonable increases of the rents of the lands where we deploy our infrastructures. Okay? That would be my ideas, my thoughts.
Thank you. And do you think 5G is disruptive to the supply chain?
Well, it would be, frankly speaking, if this disruption helps the industry, the ecosystem, to have, in our case, to have better neutral host equipment, including synergies with data centers and mobile edge computing products. It helps us to increase the connectivity needs, including fiber, front haul, back haul, and so on. Helps us to reduce the total cost of ownership of the deployments, and also to enable new DAS, distributed antenna systems, solutions in places, venues where nowadays is not profitable or is complicated, or any other help that may cause. More than happy with this, maybe disruption, I don't know. What I can say is that our competitive neutral host model is already lowering those entry barriers and also saving costs by sharing infrastructures, which is what we expect for this disruption. That's already happening, at least at some level.
Okay. And I think I've already asked you how regulation can facilitate a neutral host model, right? Any additional points there?
No. I think that more or less I said what I wanted to say. At the end of the day, is this that this neutral host model is here to help, and is one more tool that we have in Europe and in other geographies in the world for sure. But it's one tool that we have, and let's use it. Use it means that let the market work. We are competitive because we are the ones that we want our infrastructures to be open to all the market. So we are competing, and we are helping the European goals of connectivity.
Okay, thank you. First, let's move on to the next speaker. And the next speaker is Tomáš Budník. Are you there, Tomáš?
Yes.
Thein is an emerging player in the 5G private networks industry. And what are the business opportunities for standalone private 5G networks, and why now? Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. First of all, greetings to all participants, and thanks for invitation. I'll start the why. There are big opportunity, and first of all, spectrum is available. At least we are operating in Central Europe, so here we can say that now spectrum is available. Second, there is a need for some increase of security reasons. So in a lot of applications, we see this, and the security, cyber security is increasing importance. Third topic, in Central Europe, and especially in Czech Republic, we are oriented to the automotive. As a mid of Europe, there is a lot of logistics, so there is demand for applications or for use cases which will benefit in this industry. And last but not least, maybe some small reason, but still valid, is post-COVID digitalization. At least we see in some incentives in some countries to invest to this area and to benefit from digitalization, and this private 5G network or private network at all is one of the opportunity. And where are business opportunities? I think my colleagues describe a lot of things, and what I want to point out, we are discussing with the enterprises, and each enterprise have a different reason to do something. So we are starting with some use cases or business cases. We are trying to show them some benefits. And in reality, there is a lot of other alternatives. And all we know about some IoT things like narrowband IoT, LoRa or Sigfox, and such applications are valid for such use cases. So different discussion is between something as a broadband capacity delivered through some Wi-Fi 6 comparing 5. Other topic is a discussion between IT and OT. So as I said, each customer has a different opinion, different requests, and this is of course something which you are not able to cover with one solution, I don't know, as a monolithic block from somebody. And last but not least, I think even tower costs like Cellnex or in Central Europe Tein, they want to be more carrier neutral, and they're able to provide some infrastructure, and in some cases as a distributed antennas or some coverage of some business centers or factories or logistic parks. There is then good opportunity to build on the top with them for some enterprises, some private solution which will be fitting better than generic solution from the MNOs, and nothing against MNOs. This is only comment. So I think my key message is that there is no general success formula for 5G as a private network infrastructure. This is rather case-by-case discussion, and we see opportunity in some particular areas like automotive, logistics, and public safety.
So different end users have different needs, and sometimes they are met by 5G and sometimes with other technologies.
Exactly.
And you offer a variety of those technologies.
Exactly.
Does private 5G networks have a certain appeal? What kind of customers are looking for that?
I think what we see as a feedback from enterprises is that they are looking for some solution, or they have some pains, and so they don't care if it will be 5G or 4G or Wi-Fi, but they need to deliver something. In some cases, for example, high volume of connected devices. In some cases, it should be high throughput. In some cases, it's SCADA security. So we need to very carefully listen and discuss what is fitting them. And our role as a emerging player is not to be locked with some vendor. And as a colleague from Ericsson said, there is a variety of vendors for the core, for the RAN, for sensors, and there is a real trend, and enterprises, they want to somehow leverage what they have, and they have a ICT infrastructure now, and so what we are discussing with them, there are some new different or new trends in architecture, for example, cloud network functions, or mobile edge cloud or mobile edge computing. So case by case, they want to to have their own cloud, or they want to have a solution on-prem because they are looking for very low latency. So it's a case by case different, and I think to be able to collect some solution which will be from the planning to the operation, able to cover all needs, this is a key part. And that's why we are quite open. We are discussing with a lot of vendors for the for example, cloud native solution in core. We are discussing how we can cooperate with a lot of different RAN vendors. We are discussing with a lot of sensor suppliers, and case by case, we are trying to collect the best fitting solution.
So when we talk about disruption, do you disrupt then?
I think yes, because it's a little bit different than to offer, for example, cooperation with one vendor, and we don't care if it's vendor A or B or C. So we are looking for the best benefit for the customer, for the enterprise. And disruption is not only about the price. This is about speed to deliver this, about to not be in the blind way when we are delivering something. And all we are from the telco, so there were some blind ways in some history, like WiMAX and other things. So I think we are a little bit challenging MNOs and traditional vendor model with the one vendor, and no matter if it's Ericsson or Cisco or Nokia, we are looking for some solution which will deliver some value. And believe me, there is plenty of alternatives and opportunities, and usually this business case should be calculated not as a first investment or pilot, but long run for the 10 years. And maybe the last comment, this is same as all companies are speaking about the cloud and cloudification and the Kubernetes and so on. But finally, to choose right cloud provider to migrate some applications to the cloud, to educate people to be able to work in a DevOps environment. This is some process, and there are some companies which are helping enterprises to go this direction. And I cannot say that for all applications it's the best, for example, Google or Amazon or Microsoft. So it's a case by case, and that's why enterprises, they have some alternatives, and this is creating real value for them.
As regulators, we try to make the market more competitive, and you talk about new entrants and opportunities. Is there another role for regulators to make it even easier?
Definitely. One example is in Czech Republic after the auction for 5G spectrum, which was finalized this January in Czech Republic. There is a mandatory obligation for some MNOs to offer part of spectrum for private networks, but there is only one condition, that it should be only for the machine-to-machine communication. So, for example, I think one is the mandatory, and second, because we are discussing with telcos in Central Europe, we are discussing rather commercial discussion and benefiting from this. And sometimes I cannot say that it will be only for the machine-to-machine communication. Sometimes it will be communication with the humans. Sometimes it will be connection to the internet. So maybe better or broader definition. And I know that in Austria or in Germany, they are dedicated spectrum only for local players. So this is different approach. So country by country, it's different, but I believe that there is an opportunity and possibility to agree commercial terms and conditions with the telcos.
Thank you, Tomáš. We'll come back to you later. Let's move on to the next speaker, Marja Matinmikko-Blue.
Hello.
Welcome. You've done lots of research in the field of between regulation and telecom, especially telecom ecosystems. Can you tell us, because you respond so often to our consultations, and we interact maybe not so much with academia. So I want to give you the opportunity to speak out.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the research field views on these 5G business opportunities. And I believe the reason why I am here is that already 5 years ago, we started to study these future 5G alternative business models. In a national level in Finland, we established a research project on future 5G business models, and there we came up with this approach that future 5G networks, or in general wireless networks, they should not be just the privilege of the big mobile network operators, but there should be the way to allow different stakeholders to deploy their own 5G networks. And we had that thought like 6-7 years ago, and people were laughing at us. But then 5 years ago, we gathered the consortia in Finland, regulators, operators, network vendors, and the research people. We came together and started to develop and investigate this approach. Then when it comes to this technology evolution, whatever is happening now, I'd like to remind that me as a wireless engineer, we develop the technologies, and they are not just for one single system like 5G. If you come up with a really cool wireless algorithm, you want that to go to all different wireless systems. So that we should also look at these opportunities, not just for 5G, but also for different wireless technologies. And one important thing in these 5G development is the operations in these different frequency bands. We have the 3 pioneering bands, 5G in Europe, and if you look at them from wireless engineering viewpoint, they are so different. 700, 3.5, 26. You can't even really compare them in a fair way unless you look at the engineering facts behind it, and not to mention the techno-economic and business facts around them. So the propagation is so different, the deployment models are so different, so it's really hard, but also at the same time the bandwidths available are really different, so it's really hard to develop these ways to even compare or value the spectrum. If you have many questions, you can start.
Yeah, too many questions actually. Yeah. The micro operator concepts. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. So 5 years ago, we wanted to think about what are the different deployment models for 5G networks, and then we thought that different stakeholders, especially industrial players, facility owners, different campus owners, they started to express their interest in having their own dedicated networks. And that was already several years ago, but that development took a while until we really were able to make that a reality. And then we were looking into this, what kind of obstacles there are, because the existing model back then in the 4G was that the operators deploy the 4G and that's it. And the legislation, the regulations were designed for that kind of operator models. And if you want to introduce new local players to the 5G market, it really needed a review of the different regulations related to it. And then one important part was the spectrum availability, spectrum management approaches. And when you look at the 4G world, most of the bands were awarded to the operators through auctions. And then how to make that different if you want to have local networks, what are the options of spectrum availability that you can actually, how you can actually deploy a local network. You can lease the band locally from an operator, but then you fully depend on that operator, whether they are willing to do that. So therefore we made these scientific papers about the local licensing model, so that you should make the opportunity from the regulation point of view to open the market for new entry, not just to let the operators decide who can use their bands. And that has then occurred in many places since then, but in a very fragmented way. So where we are today, even within Europe, I think we were referring to this in the earlier speech, is that even within Europe, if you look at the 5G spectrum awarding decisions in the different bands, how they treat the establishment of local 5G networks through this local licensing is very, very different. And then that then creates challenges for the business opportunities. When we develop these solutions in Finland, for example, the ICT solutions for these local networks, we have a lot of ICT companies here and a lot of research projects working on that. Our own market is super small, so we want to export these same solutions to Europe and many other countries, but currently this spectrum availability is extremely different, even within Europe.
Can you tell a bit about the business potential and alternative revenues of the business model of the micro operator?
So that's the thing that we had the business school researchers working on that, and it was difficult. Like if you just sell the connectivity service, it's not it's really hard. It's really competitive market. So you have to have something on top of that. And then we started to go through these different campuses, different industries, different places, different locations, where the facility owners had their interest in having own networks within their own hands, and also the opportunity to have their own tailored services within that area, like a port ecosystem or industrial facility. And then it's within your own hands, and it's no longer to serve the end user, the mobile broadband end user customers, but it's more about these business customers and business to business customers. And you can have, for example, a local network within that industrial site where you have multiple stakeholders, like a whole value chain. If you're producing like a different product there, you have many companies, and they might all want to have a great connectivity within that area just to optimize the processes of that industrial site. So then all of a sudden you have multiple companies there, and makes total sense to have one single network there shared among these different customer groups. And then you can, with these network capabilities, you can offer tailored quality of service, tailored services for these different companies within your facility.
Thank you. We have prepared some questions that we want to ask to all of you. So let us go back to the first speaker. Ben, are you still there?
Yes, I am, yes.
Okay, the first question is for you. And while I was listening to the other speakers, I saw your name coming up in the chat box a lot with questions or comments. I can't do two things at the same time. I couldn't read the questions. If you want to give a short response, this is the opportunity.
Well, I tried to respond as much as possible on the in the chat as well.
Okay, great. See, in Europe, 5G ecosystem is developing. You see that, I think, in the many trials you participate in, and you've seen lots of use cases. And could you name one or two use cases that you expect to be successful in the short term, or will become mainstream in the long term?
Sure. Was there a chance to respond to some of the other comments as well? I don't know what the format, if there's going to be a chance of comments on comments, but I don't know what the structure of the panel is.
Go ahead.
Okay, before I go into the short term and long term potential solutions, just a little bit on all the comments I've heard. I think what I'm hearing is a lot of uncertainty about, which is good uncertainty, right? There's bad uncertainty, there's good uncertainty. There's lots of dynamism in the industry, and we don't know what the exact future is going to be in terms of the solutions that we have. The whole private network debate, I think, is a really good one to hone in on, because there are clear benefits from having private networks to allow customers to be better serviced, potentially with more nimble solutions. But it's not a zero-sum game where it has to be looked at in the round. And what we see from our experience is, to take Germany as an example, where one of the cases where there have been private spectrum set aside, yes, you can make a case for the spectrum set aside, but it led to spectrum scarcity for the MNOs and pushed up the price, which removes or reduces the investment capacity of the industry as a whole. And it also means that now, as of February, there's 108 local licenses being used, which could have been used on 20,000 different mobile operator sites. So it's not a case of it's what you choose one thing and ignore the consequences. It has to be considered in the round. I think it's really important that the policy debate considers not just what are the positives, but also the impact that those decisions have on existing use cases. But then to answer your question on some of the use cases we see for 5G, I'll just say one short-term and one long-term one. Short-term, I think health. I mean, it's on point today. Unfortunately, we all care enormously about health solutions, and it's an area that we are really trying to invest in. And 5G solutions could bring huge cost savings in terms of the running of healthcare systems. And we're working with a university clinic in Düsseldorf, and we've got a pilot 5G mobile private network with them, and we're using a combination of technologies. Going back to my earlier comments, ones that I don't understand, but edge computing, augmented reality, virtual reality, and this is to really ensure connectivity everywhere in the clinic, real-time data transfers, and a much better connectivity environment within the clinic. And it's just, I mean, for me, it seems to be just the starting point to the revolutionizing healthcare using digital solutions. And in the longer term, I'll say one which I'm a little bit cautious about as well: autonomous vehicles. I think we all recognise the risk of autonomous vehicles. I hold my hand up. I've got a relatively new car because I had to get rid of my diesel car in London because it's too polluting. So I got a car which tries to tell, it's not so much when I'm driving, it's more when my wife is driving. It tells her she's going too fast and tries to make her avoid the street furniture in the middle of the road. It's not something that we are comfortable with yet, but clearly there's a huge potential for autonomous vehicles using the 5G connectivity to make our roads a much safer place. Hopefully that is something that we can all agree on. And again, there's a partnership we've recently launched with Midlands Future Mobility, and we're providing 5G connectivity along 300 miles of road in the West Midlands part of the UK. And that's part of the consortium's trials on autonomous vehicles. So a lot of potential there. We know there will be many more use cases in the years ahead, and obviously that's why we're investing so heavily in this area.
Thank you. Mr. Boniface, still there?
Yes.
Yeah. Same question for you. Could you name a couple of use cases
for 5G? Autonomous driving is the obvious one. I think. In a factory, you need some very low latency applications. So I'm talking about private network for some robots, some specific applications where they cannot use Wi-Fi network anymore because the indoor coverage of private Wi-Fi is not good enough. So we need the 5G, 4G technology for coverage, capacity, and also efficiency. So you have plenty of applications here. I mentioned laptop and tablet, which is an easy one. I know not everybody is convinced about that, and but I think it will develop anyway. You see, Transatel is providing cellular connectivity for Airbus for predictive maintenance. So today it's 4G across the world. One of the key things they want. Per hour of flight, there's lots of data which need to be uploaded in the cloud for predictive maintenance analysis. The plan is spending not so much time on the ground, so there is an issue of uploading as much as data as possible in the minimum amount of time, so that the predictive maintenance applications can run. So those kind of example of applications which will need 5G. But I think we only have an idea about 2 or 3% of the applications. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think the world will come with plenty of application, and what we need to be sure is to have a very open system where you can have all kind of players, MNO, MVNOs, all kind of service provider, application provider, just to make sure that in Europe they have the right platform to innovate and find new services. So I don't think we should spend too much time on thinking which is the application of today or tomorrow. It will come, and that will be so obvious. And it will be, and if we say something today, we will be wrong by definition.
My connection dropped because all of you freezed at the same time. So, could you? Well, actually, I hope it's recorded and everybody else did not.
But anyway, my message is that we might have some ideas together. I think we're going to be wrong. I think the future will come with so much diversity and imagination. So what is important is that at European level, we have an open systems with, as I said, easy network access to a 5G everywhere in Europe, with a capacity to innovate, so which means for MVNOs, and also easy way to have frequencies for private network with a one-stop shopping from Berec. So it's very basic things I'm kind of requesting here, but I think this is necessary to have a kind of what I would call an open platform at European level.
Thank you. Rene Sommer?
Yes, thank you. So
same question for you.
yes, thank you. And I think it is, of course, important to think about what you mean by success. Of course, this has different meanings for different type of players with different perspectives. But if we look at it from a European perspective here, where we see the biggest benefits from a European point of view when it comes to 5G use cases, it is in principle fixed wireless access to extend connectivity where fiber hasn't come yet. So that is a very, very important area where we see significant benefits for the European economy. We see significant improvements for the agriculture sector. So this is also again about rural coverage. And from more of an industrial point of view, then of course we see significant benefits for the industrial manufacturing sectors. So these are the, I would say, most visible opportunity for us. And to give you some examples here, then, of course, if we look, for example, at the smart manufacturing, this is, of course, a different type of setup. So it is the mobile network operator model, a hybrid model, or an enterprise-driven model. But in principle, we see manufacturers like BMW, like Mercedes. We see also Spanish shipyards or Italian ports where we have different installation now in place. We recently announced also our solutions for a nuclear power plant in France. So we see a significant interest in the verticals for 5G. Maybe to finish off, I think where we not talk about is that also that 5G compared to 4G comes with significant security enhancements. So there are at least 5 specific areas where 5G provides enhanced security compared to 4G. And this is, for example, encryption, authentication, and other capabilities. And this is something which, of course, is never showing up in, if you look at on the regulators homepage, you can always see a coverage map, you can see a price, performance, and speed test. But there is nothing about how you can start measure security for end users. And maybe this is the next thing that Berec could look into, actually also provide information for end users to understand that by making different choices of technology, you will also get different level of security.
That's an interesting one. We'll write it down. Thank you. Mr. Pujol, are you there? Yeah, I can. And the same question for you.
Well, hard to say. I mean, I fully agree with my colleagues on the most promising use cases that we can envisage now, isn't it? private networks for sure, and the different applications that we can imagine with private networks for sure. Also, fixed wireless access, that would be a promising way forward, one way to use the millimeter wave, at least in the short time. And then looking at the more longer time frame, maybe probably this autonomous driving and so on could be the use cases. But here also I would like to, at least in my view, probably the key thing that we can do is to ensure that Europe will have full connectivity, will have access to the network. Okay, that's what we can do. That's what our companies and regulators and ecosystems can do. Provide connectivity, provide a good connectivity to everyone, and then let market, let young people, let innovative guys, let other invent, create, and probably in few years we will invent, or someone will invent a use case that we are not able to imagine nowadays. So let's do what we can, which is deploy networks, put the tools in place, and then let the society create.
That's a nice message. Thank you. Tomáš Budník, can you give some examples of successful trials that you've been doing, that you've been seeing, maybe?
I can give 2 examples of what we see as opportunity now. One is from entertainment, I can say. It's for the private network. You can imagine some venue or stadium, and in this moment all players have to somehow cover this stadium, and if there is in one event, of course excluding COVID area, for example 50,000 visitors, here you have to deliver superb service if you will have own private mobile network to offer some special video, to offer a lot of services which are quite known from US. So for football fans, for other sports, I think it's one good example. Combination with some net costs and to deliver some experience for the fans. It's one example. Second, from the industry, it's from logistic parks. What we see that in this moment they are operating usually or typically 100 of hotspots with the Wi-Fi, with other combination of OT. So here is a good example, because usually they need to improve their efficiency, so they need some high definition cameras with some AI and monitor some corridors. They are using automated guided vehicles. They have some sensors for QR barcode readers, and so this ecosystem needs to work properly. And there is a combination, a lot of sensors, and in some cases really demand for the high broadband for the cameras. So this is other good example for existing customer. And for the long term or for the future, I fully agree that security and mission critical communication will be definitely one target. And of course, we here can speak about the utilities. And if I can imagine that in some area you will have, for example, nuclear power plant with own network, and through some network slicing you will connect this with some public network for the rest of the country. This is one example, hopefully in the near future.
Thank you. And Dr. Matinmikko, you may not be from a business school, but you have studied the market very closely. Have you identified some promising trials?
Well, more about the business cases or the use cases where you really would benefit from 5G. I think we should go back to the roots. of what it is about. It's about mobile communication networks, mobility, people who move, machines that move. And I'm not talking about autonomous driving here. That's not what I mean. It is machines that move. Hopefully they do something else than just need to drive autonomously. They are there in the industry like cranes or logistics hubs. They are there to do other things, and for that, to have that wireless opportunities for those machines, that's a huge opportunity. And then in the more long term, like 10 years from now, and we already referred to 6G, that comes like 10 years from now, and the research domain is already looking at that. There the sustainability thing is the key. So I can't imagine these different vertical sectors to meet their sustainability targets unless they really make use of ICT solutions and wireless solutions in renewing their operations to be sustainable. And that is the real opportunity in the long term for these solutions.
Thank you. And I would have loved to listen more to you, and I think participants would agree with that. But we are running out of time. We have already secretly taken some time from the break. So I would like to thank all of you for participating. One quick conclusion is that we have a very interesting future ahead of us, and I'm happy to be in that ecosystem with all of you. And we have enough opportunities ahead of us. The next panel will start in 20 minutes and will tell more about innovations. I will stay online for the next panel. I hope all of you will too. And I hope after that we'll stay in touch on this topic or maybe other topics. Thank you.